Put in the computer. Okay. So, hello everyone. My name is Robyn McCoy. I'm president of Black Women Lawyers of Michigan. And we're doing this joint event with the Black Child Family Development Group. And I'm going to turn it over to Lynda McGhee, who is a member of both groups. And so she can do the introductions of the panelists. And we'll have the panelists give some remarks, and then we'll open it up for the Q&A with Rita, our immediate past president, Rita White, and I moderating. And I want to welcome our Wolverine Bar president, Kim Ward, with us, and everyone else. So welcome.
Thank you, Robyn. Yes, it's such a pleasure to be here and to see everybody at this hour of the night. I'm so glad that you're each here, and it is my pleasure to introduce the panelists. And I want to just forewarn everybody that it is a short introduction, but that does not mean that these ladies have not done a whole lot. They are very accomplished, and I'm just going to hit on some highlights. Lohren Carter Nzoma is a Detroiter, lifelong educator and lover of learning and the cultural arts, more specifically, traditional African dance and drum. She holds a Bachelor of Arts from Oakland University and a master's in the art of teaching in special education and a supervisor's and director's approval from Grand Valley State University. She currently holds the position of Assistant Superintendent of Exceptional Student Education for the Detroit Public Schools Community District, the largest district in the state of Michigan. This includes running the Wayne County Regional Education Agency's moderate to severe needs center-based programs. Ms. Nzoma served as the Deputy Executive Director of Gifted and Talented Education. She's an active member of the Council of Exceptional Children, Michigan Association of Administrators of Special Education, as well as a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, Lambda Pi Omega Chapter. So welcome, Ms. Nzoma, Ms. Carter Nzoma. Ms. Pricilla Ann Wells has devoted her career to serving the community, public and private sector, while routinely advocating that children and families are to be respected, treated with dignity and integrity. Pricilla Ann Wells is a licensed master clinical social worker, licensed marriage and family therapist, state certified mediator, certified military medical administrator. She's a veteran, and she possesses numerous certificates and awards related to human service. After 33 years of service to the 3rd Judicial Circuit Court of Michigan as a probation officer, among other titles, Pricilla Wells retired in April 2020. Currently, Ms. Wells is the Vice President of the Black Child Development Institute, Detroit affiliate, and her motto is, never stop serving. Laura Lefever, Director of Community Partnerships and Projects, is a native of Detroit and a graduate of Detroit Public Schools and Wayne State University with a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice. When asked, Laura would tell you that her professional home is with the Children's Center, where she has worked with children and families for the past 25 years. Throughout her career at the Children's Center, Laura has had the opportunity to be involved with several programs such as home-based services, coordinating hospital and residential services for children requiring specialized care, supervising enrichment services, leading to the development of an integrated summer camp for clients who were not welcome in the traditional summer camps. The highlight of Laura's personal life are her 2 wonderful granddaughters, who were the love of her life. So those are the 3 panelists that we have, and I'm going to hand this right back over to Attorney Robyn McCoy. You're on mute, Robyn.
Yes, I see that. Okay, thank you, Lynda. And yes, and I want to thank Lynda and Zenell Brown, the Wayne County Executive Court Administrator, for helping with, as well as Rita White, to helping to put this together. So what we'll do is I want to have each of the panelists briefly give their remarks about the state of Black children. And then we have some questions that we have come up with, and then we'll open it up to the audience to see if there's any questions from the audience. You can put it in the chat or ask the questions after we've asked some of our questions. So I'll start with Ms. Nzoma, Ms. Carter Nzoma, who I met actually on my work, working with Michigan Children's Law Center. And Pricilla, if you're able to turn your camera on, that would be great. But yeah, we'll start with Ms. Nzoma. If you can just give us briefly your thoughts on the state of Black children on a local, state, national level.
Well, good evening, everyone. First and foremost, thank you to those who took the time to put this very important conversation together. And Robyn, who, yes, we definitely met across the table having conversations about the needs of some students in Detroit Public Schools Community District. And she is a fierce advocate for students and families. And so my hat's off to you, Robyn. So I think that where I'd like to start is with a Kenyan proverb, and really it's a quote, and it just asks, and how are the children? And it comes from the Maasai people. And if you're familiar with that, then you understand that it comes from warriors leaving the village. They be gone for a period of time, and they're out fighting. Whatever is accomplished is accomplished. And when they come back, the very first question that is asked is, and how are the children? And the reason that is asked is because you can tell the state of a community by how the children are faring. So when we have this conversation, that tells us so much about our community as a whole. If the children are not well, then families are not well. Your future is not on the right path, and there needs to be some conversations and some recalibration that happens. And so here in Detroit, I can say we have some work to do. We have some recalibration to do. While we have made many strides and we have done a lot of things to shift where we were, I've been with the district for almost 5 years now. We've done a lot of work to propel the district and families and students forward. But that does not mean that all is well. Some is well, right? Areas are well. We get one thing right, and for everything you get right, there are 10 other things that have not been addressed just yet. So how are the children? We're moving forward, but it's going to take every single person in our community to continue that move forward. I can tell you that with the pandemic, and even before the pandemic, our children suffer at a higher rate than any other group of children in the nation. In 2017, there was some research study done where it indicated that Black children fared the worst out of all groups of children in terms of well-being overall. So health, education, and outcomes. So where are we now in 2022? Not much further. And there's many reasons for that. We could talk about institutionalized racism and those institutions that perpetuate white supremacy. And we could go on and on and on. And we know that the educational system is just but one of those institutions, but it may be the most detrimental. And the reason I would say that is because we are actually carving out a microcosm of the community for children. And so that's very powerful if you think about that. We are replicating in an educational system what children should expect when they leave. And if you look at disproportionality of discipline practices, you look at student code of conduct, and who fares the worst, it's our Black and brown children. So we've got a lot of work to do. We're getting there. We're bringing the right people to the table, I would say, specifically in Detroit Public Schools Community District, but that does not mean that children are always getting what they need. In my particular work, I focus on exceptional students. So that's the range of children who are at what is seemingly a deficit in some areas, those who are not faring well in a particular area, all the way to gifted and talented. And so those children are at a disadvantage where we lack equity across the board in the continuum of needs for students. If you've ever had a student who performs well, what typically happens to those students? They become the helpers in the classroom. They're helping their classmates who are not doing as well or who need a little more support. That's not fair. That's not equitable. They need more too. That also has to do with their outcomes. They come back to their community, they serve their community, but if they're not exposed, if they're not given access, then we are doing a disservice and an injustice really to those students. So, well, where we are here, we could talk about disproportionality and discipline. We could talk about the lack of resources in our schools. We all know those things. But I think today what I would urge each of us to do is to get involved one way or the other. And to open our eyes as we are a part of the commitment to students, we need to open our eyes to access. I'm going to harbor on access for a minute because that is really important. And when I say access, I mean taking a look at who are your children around? Who are you around? If everyone is the same color as you, if everyone is in the same socioeconomic status as you, you can look at your church, you can look at who's around you when you go to the grocery stores. If everyone is equally abled, right? We are not in the right spaces and we are not elevating the right things. So when we talk about people of color, that's one section, but those people of color are not a monolith. So students of color are not a monolith. So we look at, do I see students who are different, who have neurodiversity? Do I see students who are wheelchair users? Do I have young people who are hearing who may use American Sign Language? I heard some background. So. Okay. So we need to challenge ourselves and what we see as normal as we move forward and we support students, as we support families. You really have to be uncomfortable with yourself and be uncomfortable with being comfortable all the time. You have to be uncomfortable with that. If you are comfortable all the time and you call yourself an advocate for children and more specifically Black and Brown children, then you may want to do some reflection. So I think the state of our children is ask yourself, can you check those boxes and say that I see children who are different, who have different opportunities, and I'm engaging those children, I'm engaging those families in different ways. When we do all of those things, then we see the outcomes for students and families shift. And that's really where we need to put our focus. So be someone who challenges institutions and especially the outcomes from those institutions.
Okay, thank you, Lohren. And now we'll turn to Laura. Is it Lefever? I'm making it French. Is it? How do you pronounce it, Laura?
Lefever.
Lefever. Okay, Laura Lefever. Okay, so if you could go ahead and give us your viewpoint on the state of Black children.
It was just said so eloquently by my fellow panelists. I'm sitting and listening, and she has said it all so eloquently. And unfortunately, though we have made many gains on a national level, local levels, there's still so much to do. So I speak from a lens of mental health, and she touched on mental health. So I'm with the Children's Center. And well, first, let me back up. Thank you, everyone, for allowing me to sit in this space with you this evening. I certainly appreciate the invite and to be surrounded by such dynamic women. So let me first say that. So the seat that I sit in is, the area I sit in is the mental health arena, and seeing everything from secondary trauma to, a variety of diagnoses from our kiddos from birth to 21, as well as children who are experiencing cognitive developmental delays. And one thing that I can say from the seat that I sit in is that there is still such a huge stigma around mental health and the conversation around mental health in our community, and it is continuing to impact our children. One thing that hit very hard, of course, with COVID was the isolation that children and families felt, the safety factors for children. Our children who one of their only safe outlets was to go to school was taken away from them. And some of the things that we would be able to recognize, school providers and educators were able to see, we could no longer see. And so it put our children at great risk, and their needs were not being met, both on a mental health level as well as a physical level. Parents weren't taking their children to see the pediatrician. So there's this gap that is still existing right now, 2 years into COVID, where we have seen a decrease in our children or families accessing mental health as well as physical health. But we know that the numbers and the needs just didn't go away overnight. So the concerns that I have for our children, all of our children, but our Black and brown children, are the lack of services that are so desperately needed.
I'm sorry, can everybody mute themselves, or I'm gonna
I think just seeing the possibility, being able
Dr.
to
Johnson,
see
that's your phone.
who are enjoying it, who have stayed,
And
more
just
programs where we can really.
The fact that we are seeing less and less children coming into care, but we're seeing more and more children coming into our crisis center as a result of anxiety, depression, the secondary trauma, the trauma related to environmental factors. One of the major concerns for me, both on a personal and professional level, is that when you turn on the news on any given week, we are seeing our children affected by gun violence. And it's either affecting them directly or indirectly. They've lost a friend or a family member, and they're holding on to that trauma. But it's being untreated. And so the conversation around mental health and mental health stigma, mental health hygiene has to take place on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. Sitting at, I would drive my kiddos home from school and used to call it car talk, because, you can't escape, driving home with me. We would have conversations just to check in. And we have to increase that opportunity and awareness for all of our families to be able to have a conversation. Our kiddos are carrying so much. Our young children are carrying so much. Our youth are carrying so much. And they don't necessarily always have the spaces to unpack what they're carrying with them. And so for me, for me professionally and personally, that is where we need to continue to have the conversations and make gains in the mental health world, to continue to help our families, our children strive. One of the questions, what do I see our Black children facing some of the challenges? It's the continued isolation. I think it's also, as now we have children, our families and children are going back into the school systems. I think everyone thought it was just going to be great. Everyone's going to go back to school. It's going to be harmonious and great. And we have had so many school principals and counselors call us because it was rather chaotic. There was the whole, there was so much for everyone to unpack. I don't think everyone was ready and really felt that or really saw that the children were carrying so much. And so there was a lot of fights. There's a lot of expulsions going on. And there was a lot of requests for us as an agency to see young people to say, hey, are they in a healthy state of mind to even return to school? So did not prepare. So we weren't prepared for COVID and post-COVID. Let me just say that on a mental health level. One of the things I always advocate for, like I said, is the conversation around mental health and access to mental health services. Having discussions like this, sharing resources, knowing what is out there, and having the conversation with the families that we work with to say that it is okay to reach out for supports, and being armed and equipped with the tools to give them the resources. And sometimes that means sitting with them and helping them make the phone call. Because a lot of times that's the most difficult step, especially for those who have never been through a mental health journey. That first initial phone call is means so much. And for our parents and caregivers, creating spaces again for them to allowing the conversation and listening. It's our duty sometimes to listen. I know we like to problem solve. Sometimes we need to sit in a space, both personally and professionally, just to listen, and then speak, and then react, and make sure we have the tools for our children and families. Things that we can do, I would, to help. The main thing is to be equipped, be armed, be ready to listen. And when those tough conversations come up, sometimes we have to take a pause and be quiet, but we also need to encourage the conversation, allow the conversations to happen, not be afraid, lean into it, but also know where to refer and know where to encourage access.
Okay, thank you, Laura. And now I'll turn it over to my co-moderator, the immediate past president of Black Women Lawyers of Michigan, Rita White.
Yes, good evening, everyone. So encouraged that we're having this platform meeting today, as it is so important to keep our village and keep a hold of our village to protect, support, and rise up. So our next panelist is Monica Thompson. And if you can introduce yourself and provide an overview of your assessment of the state of Black children.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Before I get started, just want to thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel. So excited to be here tonight. I want to piggyback on everything that has been said. I totally agree with it. I am the principal of Jefferson Douglas Academy, K through 8th grades, but have been an educator for more than 20 years and have played many different roles in educating children. And I just want to say at our school, we're dealing with, my motto is quality education, every student, every day. And we want to educate the whole child. And so I totally agree with the mental health state of our students. During the pandemic, the majority of our students dealt with some type of trauma. They lost a family member, they lost a grandmother that maybe was that one stable person they had in the family. So when we have our students in school, what we're finding before we can even try to address the learning gaps, because we know that virtual learning did not work for the majority of our students. And so we're trying to address that learning gap, but before we can even do that, we have to address the mental health of our students. We have to get them in a good place where they can actually sit down and they can actually focus and they can listen. So we're making sure that we're dealing with the whole child. We have to deal with academics. Yeah, we want to address that, but we have to address the physical, the mental as well. And what I'm finding out too, we have to really work closer with our parents to really support our parents, because we are still in a pandemic. A lot of them are still suffering with loss within their family. Some of them actually, many of them end up quitting their jobs or losing their jobs because they had to be at home because there was no one else to support the learning of their students when their students were learning virtually. So just really that piece, really working with our parents and building relationships, helping them understand how they can support their students and close that gap. So that's one thing that we're really focusing on, and we are working hard, and we're seeing a lot of gains, really building that community with the parents. Also, this is not the state of our child, but it affects our children. Our teachers are stressed out. So being able to deal with the teachers and give them the supports that they need, because we know they drive the academics. The administrators, we have to find ways to support our teachers and make sure our teachers are good, because if they're not good, our students are not going to be good. So I would say the state of our children, we all have to jump in and we all have to support. I'm so blessed that our school has a partnership with BCDI, and they are supporting our families. They were able to be a blessing to some of our families during the Christmas time. So they are they donated hats and gloves and things of that nature to support our students. So I would say, far as schools, you have to try to get those partnerships. So if you could partner with a school, if you could partner with if you don't have children, if you have nieces and nephews, if you have a school that's in your neighborhood, reach out and see what you can do to support, because schools really need support at this time, because we are trying to balance a lot of things. We're trying to balance filling that learning gap. We're trying to balance supporting our parents, and definitely trying to support our teachers as well.
Thank you so much, Ms. Thompson. I would like to next introduce Ms. Pricilla Wells, panelist. Mrs. Pricilla. You're on mute, so.
Hello. And how's everyone this evening? And thank you so much for having me a part of this panel tonight. I want to start with echoing everything that has been said. It's not too much I can add, but I can start with, it takes a village. It takes not just a teacher, not just a lawyer, not the mental health worker, not just a social worker, not just the courthouse. It takes all of us. Where do I see our children today? At a good point. We know all of the negative minuses, but they're at a point. And I want to stress to each and every one of you, we have got to do, not only educate the reading, writing, and arithmetic, but we have got to teach them their history. We have got to teach them who they are, where they come from, and where they can go. We've got to be able to identify not just the presenting problem, which Ms. Thompson so eloquently spoke about, COVID. COVID has affected the family. And if we don't reach out to the parents of that child, then we're at a loss. We have to stop looking at the presenting problem and look at a family problem. Look at what is going on with this child. How can I get this child to the next level? How come it is this child is always anxious and stressed out? It's a lot going on in our world today. And with families, I have had many parents say to me, you know, I just don't know what to do. One day is virtual, one day is come to class, wear masks. They don't know. The more I say the village, that means all of us reach out to these families, not just with what they say, but how come you're saying these kinds of things, and try to touch what's going on with that family. During COVID, isolation is not necessarily a good thing for the family. We all would love to be Norman Rockwell, but that's not what happens today in our society. Once the children were allowed to come back in school, you saw all kinds of problems. You saw the stress, the anxiety, the trauma, but those parents are still experiencing those issues. So we need to reach out to them too. We have plenty of resources in our community. We need to connect the children, the family, the parents with those resources. We need to mentor. We need to volunteer. That's how we get our children, especially children of color, to the next step. And of course, technology is wonderful. The world will be theirs once they master it. But the more they understand who they are, where they come from, and where they can go, the better we will be in this society. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pricilla. So, yeah, what I would say is one thing that I was seeing throughout the pandemic is, for me, you know, because I'm coming at it, wearing a couple hats. I'm an educator, so I'm a college professor. So we started teaching in person, and then it phased into virtual, and then the next semester was all virtual. And so, and I had students that were struggling. You know, they were struggling when it with the pandemic and the virtual, and then when it was all virtual, I had kids that were struggling. And I kind of had to work. You know, I generally work to try to meet where all the kids where they are. And then as an advocate, what I'm seeing with K through 12 is, you know, typically I have had historically, I've been an advocate more for special ed students But then general ed kids were struggling too. And so I just feel like, so one of the problems I've been seeing is that there are kids that are behind, and there's some kids that virtually they were able to thrive, they were able to excel. But then there are some kids that were not. And so that brings me to the first question that I want to bring to the pose to the panelists is, what are some of the most problems that you're seeing that the children are facing at this time?
You're talking about children in classrooms with virtual instruction?
Yeah, or
Is
just African-American children. What are some of the problems that we're seeing for children at this time? What are you guys seeing? What are the experts seeing?
I don't
Yeah,
know
well, one of the
expert, but oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Reverend Johnson.
That's I've been on 3 Zooms. I'm sorry, I need to change my name and title. I was just going to say that one of the adjustments is basically adjusting to sitting on a computer has been very, very, very traumatic for students. And they are so happy to be in a classroom. Children, high school students, and especially adults on the college level, they feel like they have found freedom. Just the idea of sitting at a computer from 8 o'clock in the morning, having a little break, a lunch at 12, then back until 3 o'clock is absolutely draining. And it has affected their retention, their attitude towards learning, and also their language development. So I'm glad, and I hope that we will not have to return to that type of environment totally. And it has really shown to be devastating in some instances.
Okay, and then Lohren, I think you were about to give a response as well.
Yes, I did want to kind of pivot that question if I could. While there definitely have been some challenges for families and students, and I'll talk a little bit about those, I do want to highlight that there has actually been some pivoting that progresses us forward, I would say globally, in terms of understanding technology use. So in our district per se, where we have a critical mass of staff who are, I would say, 5 years or so away from retiring, technology had been a consistent issue. Getting to have large groups of staff get together was a challenge. And so it definitely had a learning incline for everyone. It was frustrating and all of those things, but the amount of efficiency we've seen since everyone's gotten a little more comfortable for staff and students has really gone up a lot. So I do want to kind of spin that a little bit, but to the point of challenges, I would say that home life, as someone was saying, is not the same for everyone. People would say, oh, just close school, you shouldn't be bringing school back. Our union, our DFT was really strong-headed about that, but everyone is not safe at home. And we saw it actually while we were on remote. I had several instances that I had to be involved with domestic abuse and it just being so blatant, child abuse, so on and so forth. We saw someone literally their camera faced the door and every 5 minutes someone was at the door with the dad. And so you know what that means. So, I mean, everyone's home is not conducive, or there's so many people and it's not a large enough space where they can't focus. So I don't agree that everyone did well, but we do have the other side of that where some kids did progress well. We have some children who have behavioral challenges, some children who are on the spectrum for autism, where it eliminated this anxiety around the social needs of every day, navigating how do I interact with my peers, how do I respond appropriately to my teachers. So we saw a little bit of everything, honestly. And so it's true, it was not ideal for most of our students with moderate to severe needs, those who are severe multiply impaired, they require nursing, feeding, those things. Of course, that was a challenge. If they couldn't attend to a task, that's a challenge. But in the middle ground, there were some wins, there were some losses, and we all came out learning a lot more than we started with, that's for sure. So I think the balance here is learning where to integrate some of those things we learned during remote learning and the quarantine, and then balancing it back in schools with the real-time effects of what needs to happen for all students.
Okay, thank you. And then Laura, I think, did you have something to add?
Yes, you know, and I agree. And I want to say to Monica and Lohren, who are both from the education side, I think this gave parents a new understanding and an appreciation for what teachers and administrators do, because they were balancing being at home, trying to work virtually, and also educate their children, and found that it was extremely difficult. So I think everyone really walked away or still continue to walk away with a greater appreciation for our educators. And everything, I always just want to say, everything Lohren is saying is so real and so imperative. You know, our children, the schools are a safe place for our children to be. We were finding children coming into our crisis care center, you know, increased levels of anxiety and depression. When they come to our crisis center, they are either at risk for harming themselves or someone else. So we still see some of those numbers rising. And those are the ones that are just coming to us on campus. Many families still take their children to Children's Hospital because normally it's the mindset, my child is in crisis, I need to take them to the hospital. Not all, we're not all situations where children need to go to the emergency department for a mental health crisis. Those who are at immediate risk of self-harm, whether they're where they've ingested something or cutting or some other form or fashion, or where they physically are really working to carry out the act, you know, those numbers are still even high. But we were seeing those numbers of our children with superficial wounds because of, I need someone to listen to me. I want someone to hear me. And these were the superficial, there were statements or the superficial wounds, and you never want to take those. You want to take every conversation of self-harm seriously, but we're finding children, they want to express how they feel due to isolation. And mind you, within the last 2 years, you know, you turn on your TV or they're on their phones, and what they see, just incident after incident of social injustice, where Black and brown people continue to be harmed, continue to be shot. And it's this level of anxiety for not only our children, but for our parents to say, is it safe for my child to even be outside? We're not even talking about COVID, but are they going to be safe walking in the neighborhood, driving around? And so we hosted a few events with our youth. The youth actually hosted events to really talk about that and how they felt. Not only it was COVID in protest, and how they really felt about the state across the nation of their own health care safety, and their physical safety, just being in their own neighborhoods, like again, walking down the street, and not worrying about whether they were going to be killed or harmed in some way. And so it was just a great deal of pressure that they're carrying around with them. And in some instances, they don't have the conversation, but it turns into self-harm or threats of harm to someone else.
Okay, did we have anybody else on the panel that wanted to address that question? Pricilla, it looks like you wanted to say something.
Yes, I wanted to add to how important it is for all of us in our specific professions to have time to talk to the people that we interact with. It's the one with the silent pain that is ignored that grows into explosive pain. I don't know about the educators and how much time they have to simply talk. We use the word communicate, but to talk to the children about what's going on with them, because I know it has been a great transition from virtual reality to in classroom. So you got a process there, but we need to encourage each and every professional to have time to talk to the people that they interact with so they could better understand where the family, the parent, the child is coming from. I just wanted to comment on that.
And then Monica, did you have anything to add to what we were talking about? Oh, you have to unmute yourself.
I totally agree what everyone is saying. A struggle I saw with our students is just continue when they come back into building to be confident. So just to build up that confidence that you're back in school. We have been out and just getting them back into the rhythm of being in the building and following the schedule. So that was a struggle at first, but we've made a lot of ground with that, and they're getting back into that process. But just having them back into the building and following that schedule of being back in school.
Yeah, and I will say this too. My stylist, I was talking to him a couple weeks ago, and there's this big issue about social media and bullying. I'm sure you guys have heard this in the news too. He it was a friend of his whose granddaughter was on social media and was being bullied and ended up committing suicide. So I really feel like I have a nephew, and we monitored what he did on social media. So I definitely think that parents need to be encouraged to be on the social media with the kids and just check in with the kids to make sure that they're okay. Even, when the work I was doing at the juvenile court, we were seeing a lot of, with educational advocacy, we're seeing there was a lot of drama going on social media that would spill over into the classroom. So I think that's a big, a big issue. There's like positive things that can come from social media, but there's also negative things as far as this bullying. Even with the Miss USA, the Miss Black USA, they said that she had experienced some people bullying her and harassing her, and so then we definitely have to make sure that people feel safe, that they have a safe space, and that they're addressing any mental health concerns.
So now, in terms of, we have another question. Now this question really, because I also do work in the juvenile court. I represent parents and children on a pretty regular basis. And a lot of times in court, when we come to a position where now it's time to offer services, a lot of times these services aren't necessarily available inside the court to be offered. And so I look at it as, a lot of times with my parents, they'll call me and I'll have to go Google housing resources, financial resources, mentoring programs. What, in your opinion, your assessment, how do you believe that we can, how can services be offered to them? Is there a way that we can maybe begin putting together, or some tribunal can put together a universal database that really disseminates very effective services involving what I just talked about and others, to really get out to the families and parents so they don't have to move into the court system, so they can get help before. And like I said, it takes a village. So we can really have this type of hotline, this information line that we can disseminate to the news. So it becomes national, it becomes local, that people can just give a call and say, hey, listen, my child needs tutoring. They need financial assistance. They need food, more food for the family. We need educational assistance. Is there a way we can get the services really more disseminated, so people can be very prepared to know how to go to obtain and find resources for housing, etc. Just if Ms. Lefever, if you can respond to that question first.
Sure, it's an excellent question, and I appreciate you answering it. It's funny. We have United Way out here, and they are the clearinghouse for all community information. If we simply gave each of our family members, encouraged them to call 211, just those 3 numbers, it is a wealth of resources. If the courts, if everyone had with them attorneys, everyone, the case managers, if you have that 211 information, it goes a long way. It's your housing information. It's your food insecurities information. It's your mental health, your physical health. The challenge is sometimes to even pick up the phone. Some of our just picking up the phone is a challenge, but that 211 is a wealth of information. And on the community mental health side, and many of you may already know this, but Detroit Wayne Integrated Health, there are so many community partners within DWIN, as we call it. But again, it's getting families to make that initial call. And I do have to say this, and I'll drop everything into the chat. So the challenge is making those first calls and having enough patience. I just say this as a mental health provider in our agency, what frustrates us the most, it's the bureaucracy of paperwork. but when families are, you know, community mental health, we got to get through that first intake call and assessment, and families oftentimes get frustrated because when you need services, you need services. I don't want to ask the 500 questions, but we try to pose it as when you go to your physical health doctor, you know, you got to answer some initial questions so that we can make sure we're providing you the right type of care. So it's on the provider side, having that right frame of mind to engage families so they don't walk away or get discouraged after the first conversation. But 211 and Detroit Wayne Integrated Health, because there is a plethora of providers, both on the children's side and the adult side, that can provide the services that our families need. And because we all can't do everything. We've got, as you said, Attorney White, we need to have resources at hand to be able to provide the families. And then sometimes, of course, taking that extra step is, do I need to be with you, or can I have an advocate with you just to make that initial phone call?
Thank you, thank you. Ms. Carter and Nzoma, would you like to weigh in on this question?
Sure. Yeah, great question. And I was going to mention 211. So Laura and I are aligned there, and DWIN. As a public school district, and also public school academies for that matter, we have something called an obligation for child find, right? So if a parent comes in and they say, I have this challenge or this issue, that really needs to be taken to the leader of the school building, and it's different depending on the size of a school, but they have to identify someone who manages that process of child find in their building. So if you say, hey, you know, my child is having issues with mental wellness, or I'm not sure, but I think this is an issue, or I think they're having a learning problem, then they need to activate that child find process. Also, what I would say is that I can talk about Detroit, and that we are connected very closely with DWIN, with 211 United Way. And we recently launched, and I'm also responsible for all the social workers, psychologists, and all of those ancillary staff in the district as well. We've recently launched a two-way communication protocol with Children's Hospital, with DWIN, and other mental health providers, where we have trained on and dispersed a suicide and risk assessment or threat assessment protocol in our district. And so some of those pieces of, you know, something happens or a child makes a comment that sounds like, you know, we need to look into that. We have a protocol that is a quick assessment tool, like a screener. And then however that's scored out, and it's very quick, then it could say, hey, these are the resources we need to activate right away. And then we let them know what those next steps are. I will say this, because I'm talking about what my district does. And again, resources are different in varying districts and schools. I will say that we really do need to focus in on training our parents, because our parents, and I will just talk about my own community and what I know within my family, is that we're often not taught to truly address when a young person says, hey, I am feeling this way. You know, a lot of times elders in the community will kind of put that over here, or say you need to toughen up, or you need to, you know, get over it, or when I was your age, this is what that looked like. And that's not helpful, really. So we really have a lot of work to do to support our elders and the adults in the family to be aware, to notice, to have some awareness, and to have those resources as well. So I urge you all in your own organizations, in your church, your mosque, whatever it may be, to engage in those types of community engagements with families so that we can shift that conversation and shift the way that we respond to our young people.
Thank you. Would any of the other panelists like to respond to the question that I just posed to all of you?
Yes, I'll jump in. So with our school doing COVID, we know that our parents need the resources. And again, our teachers were on the front line. So we created a form, student support services. If they saw something, if they talked to a teacher, they would enter that information. And then we would send out our counselors, our social workers to reach out to those families. And what they found is a lot of times our parents don't even know how to ask for the resources that they may need the first steps. So definitely 211 is a big one, but we did create a community resource guide for our families, and we gave it to them. So it had all type of information, all type of community resources where you could go get food, if you need counseling, information, so that they had it right at their fingertips. And it was very helpful to our parents.
Ms. Wells? Ms. Wells, if you'd like to respond.
I just wanted to comment on whatever tool we use for the families. We need to do a little follow-up. It can be random, whatever, that the families follow through with the information that we have given them, because oftentimes they're lost. They don't know which, like in the pamphlet from United Way, they're lost in what it is or who it is I should call. So we should be open to just simply follow up. And I know we all have busy lives, but it just takes a moment to prevent a disaster.
Thank you. Rob, Attorney McCoy will ask the next question, but just everyone, please keep an eye on the chat, because there are a lot of links that we should all take down and we have in our little pocketbook of resource. And it would be great, Ms. Thompson, if you can have a chance to maybe provide the community resource guide to the Black women lawyers and the BCDI, so we can definitely use that as a resource to, forward on. Attorney McCoy?
Yes, the next question I have is, we actually have kind of touched on it already, but what can parents or caregivers do to help Black children? And I actually want Saba, I know Saba wanted to give some brief remarks. So Saba was with the Park West Foundation. I've worked with her actively when I was in the juvenile court. So Saba, if you can just give us some brief remarks, and then we'll turn it over to the panelists again on the question of what can parents or caregivers do to help Black children?
One specific thing, actually, working with foster youth, is that a lot of young people in residential placement, whether they are in trouble or in foster care, are attending schools that are non-accredited, sometimes for months, years. And when they try to come into the public school system or the private school system or the charter schools, they are immediately enrolled within 5 days. And then they wait for transcripts, not knowing none of those credits are going to be acceptable. So you have 18 and 17-year-olds and 16-year-olds being told to start as a freshman, and a lot of people are dropping out because they get discouraged because no one wants to repeat grades they've already accomplished. Tomorrow, actually, foster youth who have experienced this are speaking to some DHS administrators, but we would love your support as well to advocate, because this is widespread across the state. It's not just a Wayne County issue, but obviously Wayne County and Kent County has the most representation, considering the disproportionality of Black students or Black children that are in the system. And then school systems are confused and they don't know what to do, because they do take the kids within 5 days, then they don't know what to do because the credits just don't add up. And everyone is confused, and this has been happening for years, but the youth are finally addressing it. We would love for you to come in. It's a 30-minute Zoom with a 30-minute response. And even if you just as an organization want to just write and say, we definitely feel like this should end, there's no reason. We are partners with MDHHS, and we're asking that there is no reason in this virtual world that we cannot use accredited schools. And it's always a shock for kids who all of a sudden think they're seniors being told we have to go back to being a freshman. So a lot of kids are dropping out because of this. It's happening to a lot of Black kids, and it's happening to others as well, of course, that are in the foster care system, and delinquent youth as well. All the benefits that go for foster youth also apply to delinquent youth under the supervision of the state, and that's not applied. Again, Wayne and Kent County will suffer most, and their funds will go to other counties because people are not utilizing these funding resources to support youth that have been under the supervision of the state. So that's another thing as well. But we would love to have you as a guest to listen to what the youth are saying. But there is no reason in this time and day that we have kids being almost fooled into thinking they're doing real schoolwork when none of it counts.
Okay, thank you, Saba. So for the panelists, can you speak to, I know we have touched on some of it, but what do you think that parents or caregivers specifically can do to help with children? I mean, I will, before you answer, I'll give my own anecdote. Like I had a young man actually in the Lincoln school districts in Ypsilanti, Lincoln Consolidated Schools, and he got in trouble. It started as, it was a mixed case. It was a delinquency case. But when we got to the root core of the issues, I really pressed the school about making sure he got the right testing. And he had had an IEP, an individualized education plan, since he was like in kindergarten, but we really pressed, and actually it was the village approach. Everybody came on board. We found out he had dyslexia, dyscalculia, and we were able to help him to successfully graduate. And I just think about what if the family hadn't brought me in? How would they, because they were focusing more so initially on just the delinquency part of it, but our experts said that my client was acting out, and part of it was the frustration that he had because he had not been properly diagnosed with his special ed issues. So so we'll turn over to the panelists. What can parents and caregivers do to help kids?
Well, I can give my 2 cents. 2 parts. Number one, this is going to sound really simple, but it's very poignant. Listen to children. It's that simple. Listen to children. And the second part to that will be, and I'm talking about parents, I'm talking about educators, stop degrading our students and being cynical with students. It's something that I hear and it's like nails on the chalkboard, right? We expect them to come into spaces where they're supposed to be educated, learn, ingest. And I hear it over and over again. And I've worked in Detroit, I've worked in Ann Arbor Public Schools. I was assistant director of special ed there. I'm not just talking about where our Black and brown students are pulled. I'm talking about in general. Listening to young people and knowing that they are individuals. That sounds very minuscule, but I'm telling you, we miss a lot and things are prolonged because we do not do that as a whole. And so I advocate for young people when I say that, and I'm talking anytime they can talk and they can share a story, we need to be listening and pulling the pieces out that are relevant and helping them move their conversation forward. So that is, it's small, but it goes very far. So that's number one. And then number two, I just want to, I guess what the other, who was just speaking? I'm sorry, who was that? Who was just speaking? Oh, Saba. Okay, sorry. Hi, Saba. So what Saba was saying is, it's jarring, but it's not uncommon, unfortunately. And there's a couple follow-up questions I have, and it's for another time, another place, which I'll call you, Saba. We will talk about that. But what we need to do is hold educators accountable. Yes, we are under a lot of pressure right now, but guess what? We're also at work. It is our work, and it's really important work. So you can hold us accountable without being nasty. That's one thing I say. You can sit at the table, you can tell me the sky is purple when I can clearly see it's not, but it's all about delivery, right? And I am okay with not being right. I push my team to okay with not being right, not having the last word, but truly hearing when people come to the table and they are speaking to you about their child, about their student. People are giving you the best that they have, which is their legacy, which is their child, their student, who they're charged with caring for. And so when people present you their best, you need to approach the situation as if you are dealing with someone's best, right? And whatever you would want as an educator or someone who deals with young people, whatever you would want for your own family, for your own children, you need to come to the table with that each and every day. And you have to remember, you're at work. Parents are not. Children are not necessarily at work. That might be their job to do it well. And I'm not saying disrespect is okay at any given time. I will end a meeting very quickly if there's disrespect, but we can have a conversation, and especially when we keep the children at the front of that conversation. So if there's an issue, there's an issue. We can write the issue down as adults who have fully developed prefrontal lobes. You know, that happens when you're about 25 or beyond 25 in most cases, right? then, you know, we can problem solve usually and figure out a solution. But we're asking sometimes young people to come with a solution or to explain their behavior when they really can't do it. It may have been as a result of anxiety, which really can cause brain fog, and they can't really explain. I was in a situation, I'm gonna give this example and then I'll sit back, but I'll give an example where I was at a school and there was a young man who has an emotional impairment. He was having anxiety. It was his first day back. If you recall, Detroit did not return after the holiday break, but we stayed out on remote learning for some time, right? So there's a lot of inconsistency for young people. Well, we came back that first day, and that was the first time that child actually met his new teacher, right? So there's a teaching shortage, so you can imagine. They saw each other online, not the same as in person, not the same as in a new class. So his anxiety was up here and he had an outburst. So that resulted in us having to engage with this student because he was hitting, he actually hit me. I'm in the classrooms. I do not leave from an ivory tower. Whatever my title is, all I know is that means help children, right? So I'm in classrooms and I am seeing what's going on in classrooms. So the young man, he actually physically hit me, right? He said, oh, you assaulted Miss So-and-so and you know who she is and who are, I said, hey, wrong conversation, wrong time. Right? They wanted him to apologize. They wanted him to know who I was and why. I said, wrong conversation. Please stop talking. That is way too much. If he is having an episode at this particular level, he is not able to engage with you. He does not need to apologize to me. He is recognized as having a certain level of need. That's why he's here in the first place. Yes. So, you know, we have to have that conversation. And as a leader, and I say I'm a leader of leaders, I engage with my staff in that way. No, I am going to coach you through what's happening here, and I demand that you understand what needs to happen in this particular area, or you are in the wrong space, and I can help you do whatever else needs to happen. But the one thing that is not acceptable is that the child does not come out of this better than he left. And he gets to come back. Every day is a new day. And so as an administrator, holding people accountable who are professionals, whatever their professional realm is, right? Again, I'm not saying they have to take being disrespected. I'm not saying they have to take any form of abuse, but I will not allow staff to use criminal language when they talk about young people and children, especially those who have an exceptionality or a disability. It is unacceptable to me. And so therefore, we have to give young people a chance each and every day to get it right. They are still developing. And so I just encourage everyone here to move forward with that understanding that children are people. They don't always get everything right. And just think, where would you be if you were held accountable at whatever age that young person is having an issue to the same level that we require of young people in some cases today. So that's what I have to say. Let children be children and let professionals be professionals.
Thank you, Ms. Carter Nzoma. And so do we have any other panelists that want to speak to that issue? Ms. Wells or Ms. Thompson?
Yes, I want to say that the parent is the best advocate for the child. And if we, the professional, approach these children with problems and their parents with a holistic, supportive role, that we will be able to get out of that child the behavior in which they are acting out. And if we're able to tap into, that means develop a brief relationship with the parent, we can get the parent to discuss with us what type of behavior that they perform in the community as well as home. The main thing I feel professionals need to do is be more open-minded, especially with children of color, to be more supportive and understanding, yet fulfill our role, but be able to reach out and touch somebody, so to speak, to use a phrase. We have to do that in order to get the true behavior and emotional thoughts of that child and that parent. Once the child sees that the parent is okay and supporting them then the parent will open up. And we will get further into understanding and assisting that child and that family.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wills. Ms. Thompson or Ms. Lefever?
I will jump in. I want to say, kind of piggyback on what Ms. Wells said. Definitely parents, what they can do is support is they can be present and they can advocate for their child. As an educator, as a administrator of a school, I always tell my parents how I measure what we have at our school. I have 2 sons. They're grown now, but would I want this teacher in front of my son? Would I want this environment for my son? If the answer is no, then it's not going to be at my school. And I like to always meet with parents and meet them where they are, because I know every parent wants the best for their child. They may not know how to get it. They may not know how to say it, but they want the best for their child. So I'm there to support you to make sure that you are getting the best, that your child has a high quality education. So parents, just having them advocate for their children. If they have questions, feel free to answer those questions at all of my parent meetings. I always end it. Thank you for entrusting your children with us. We don't take it for granted. This is your greatest gift you have, and you bring them to us each and every day for us to educate them. And we take it very serious. So just continuing to help our parents to be able to advocate. Ask the question. Come ask me what's going on. Come ask the teacher, because that's your job. That's your child. So just making sure the parents are present. If you have family members that have children, just make sure that they're present. They're attending conferences. They're coming to PTO meetings. They're asking the questions. If they don't understand anything, that they call the teacher to the carpet, and that they get the answers that they need to make sure their children are successful.
Mhm.
Okay, Ms. Lefever?
Again, agree with everything that was said. I want to point out too, as we encourage parents to listen to what their children are saying, we also want to encourage them to listen out for what their children are not saying. If they, if you have an outward child, an outward going child, and then you see them pulling back, or they're isolative, their conversations or mannerisms or behaviors change, listen for all of that. So I point with my eyes, listen for all of that, those changes in behavior. Something's going on there, and be in tune to your child. And again, don't be afraid to have the question. And one thing that I want to say to everyone as professionals, as you're engaging with parents, it's the key word. Don't forget that we have fathers involved. And so often we may not see the father present, but don't assume that the fathers are not involved. And I'm reminded of this because my colleague, John Miles, is here this evening, and he facilitates our fatherhood initiative at the Children's Center. And one of the things at the forefront, John, and I know you can hear me, is that we have so many fathers who are involved, and there's the assumption that just because dad may not live in the home, that he's not involved with his child. And we find very oftentimes that is just the opposite. I will go between the 2 buildings on our campus, and we'll see, a mother or a grandmother inside, but there's equal number of fathers sitting in the car. And John Miles will go out into the parking lot and say, "Hey, why are you out in the car?" And remind us as professionals constantly in a woman-dominated field in mental health and social work. What are you all doing to engage the fathers? Don't assume that they're not around. They play just as an important role in their child's life. So I wanted to make sure that I left that as well, as we continue to work with children and families, that these dads are out there. We have to make sure we do a better job of engaging them and also listening to them.
Okay, thank you. And that was great. And so we're going to wrap it up. I'm going to turn it over to Rita to give our closing remarks on this. And I think it would be good for us to actually do a part 2 of this and have some kids come through and talk to kids, hear directly from the kids, like what they're experiencing, especially with the pandemic. And like what are they, they're some of the best experts on what their needs are. So I'll turn it over to Attorney White.
Yes, thank you so much for attending this. This has been very, 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 it's been very positive to really push forward in terms of really protecting our children and advocating and making sure we keep a safe community for all of our children. As I said before, and as everyone else has said, it takes a village. Now I'm going to thank the panelists, Lohren, Carter, and Nzoma, Monica Thompson, Pricilla Wells, and Laura Lefever. You've been awesome. And we need this to continue, as Attorney McCoy indicated. This needs to be a continued conversation. One comment that I'll leave just to kind of add into the conversation is that we really need to focus on positivity. Focus on positivity. Do any of you remember when you were in maybe first grade, third grade, second grade, middle school, when you had a teacher come to you and be like, you have such a gift in this area.
Mhm.
Have you ever forgotten that? How did that push you to where you're at right now? For an example, I know someone who was a young person that lived in a home that had a lot of soot coming through a chimney. So he developed a hearing issue and he couldn't hear. And he was judged, and it wasn't a positive time at that moment, to the point that they put him into special ed because he had a certain way of talking. So his mother advocated and said, no, he's not special ed. He's not special ed. There's nothing wrong with him. Just like I said, you need to advocate. And then basically he was able to come out of special ed, go into middle school, high school, college, medical school, and become a doctor. That's what we need to do. We need to pull out all the talents, all the positive things about our children, and make sure that really plays a role in their life. And that person is a person I'm living with right now, who is my husband. So, so we have to really focus on that, because if we don't pull that out of a child and they don't realize, listen, I got this talent. I have this talent, I have this intelligence. They're not going to really feel that foundation to move forward and stick in the negative and move into the positive. So let's all really focus on our positive children, lift them up, and make sure we're all together as a village to keep them moving. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a blessed evening. Thank you for bearing with us with the technical stuff, all that, figuring it all out. So, and stay tuned for our next programming. So, all right. Good
Thank
evening,
you.
everyone.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.